Welcome to Watch the Booker Man and to the continuation of our rebuild of WCW. Now, last week, you may remember, I had some really good news that a lot of the roster had moved up. We now have more people as major stars, more people as stars, more people recognisable and more people well known, which means that we have not so many people as unimportant at the minute. So I'm very, very happy with that. The only issues we have is that Fit Finlay, Hugh Morrus and Buff Bagwell aren't too happy, and I think you'll accept that we can live with that. So I'm just going to go through. I don't expect too much to happen this week. I've not put in any negotiations for new signings. I'm quite happy now with the shape of the roster, so it's just a case of us running through to next week. If anything interesting comes up, I will of course tell you about it, but it should be the case that this is a video where we go straight into this week's episode of WCW Nitro. And as I suspected, there was very, very little of note during the week, so we are now going to run to the show. Obviously, I don't want to give anybody the night off. Is there any regions we've not been to? I'm not going to go to Puerto Rico, and I'm not going to go to Hawaii, so it looks like we've been everywhere so far, so I'm thinking we'll go to one of the regions that we are more popular in. So should it be the Mid-Atlantic and the Stuart C. Seagull Centre, we will be doing actually. We will then spend our creative energy on a creative finish, likely to succeed with no restrictions. An angle idea will go for, wow, things are going pretty well for us at the minute. There's a chance I can cheer Buff Bagwell up when I eventually deploy this, so it's a bit of a gamble. So I'm just going to discard that actually, because the only people I'm going to use a character idea on is people who are unhappy, and I'm not risking them getting even more unhappy with the things that I do. Juventud Guerrera brought before Wrestler's Court. It's only taken a week for him to be a pain in the neck, but I kind of feel like a locker room leader should be doing the Wrestler's Court. But yeah, he made a mess backstage. I hope he didn't defecate in anybody's luggage. He's had to buy everybody drinks, so that's currently fine. And we've had a small positive effect on Juventud Guerrera, so maybe a thing we won't see. Lance Storm and Dustin Rhodes fighting. Big Vito and Fit Finlay fighting. Hugh Morrus and Charles Robinson fighting. Kurt Hennig says that he would be willing to put over David Flair. I love that attitude from you, Kurt Hennig, but David Flair's not going over you. That is ridiculous. Fit Finlay ran the training drills, and Dusty Rhodes demanded to be made a locker room leader. Now, he's friends with one of our other locker room leaders. To be fair, I will just make him one, because I think I probably would have made that decision anyway eventually. I really quite like that that's in the game. Reading these ones are pretty boring, so the fact that you get a little different one like that is pretty interesting. A few good notes, to be fair, as well as the negative ones. I'll skip that because I have no interest in doing that. But the backstage inner circle it is, isn't it? So we've got 4 locker room leaders. Is there anybody else who's eligible who I might consider for that? Big Van Vader, probably not. Kurt Hennig could probably be one, but I'm probably happy with just having 4 at the minute. Chief Enforcers, I might add, to be fair. Yeah, let's put Kurt Hennig and Van Vader as the Chief Enforcers. You're not going to mess with them, are you? I'm hoping that can get all these backstage incidents in check. If you're acting up and Fit Finlay, Big Van Vader and Kurt Hennig are on your case, then I'd say you're pretty stupid, to be honest. And we'll leave everything else as it is, because I've seen how it can affect and upset people, namely Fit Finlay. And I'm just going to look at our roster there. We have got a couple of things pre-booked. We have 3 major stars. We even have 1 star and plenty of people in well-known and recognisable. Barely any in unimportant. Okay, fair enough, there's quite a lot, but compared to what it was when we started, I'm absolutely delighted. I am slightly concerned that the only reason that that's the case is because I've basically slowly making the company less over, so it looks better, kind of a company that's only at 66 and 72 popularity has got these stars, because I assume it is relative to your company's overness. But I'm just going to take it as a positive because, well, there's been enough negatives so far. But I'm going to fill up this booking sheet and I'll be back on the other side with another episode of WCW Nitro, and there's going to be another big debut on this week's show. So stick around for that. So everybody in the company is used in one way or another on tonight's show, so I didn't feel the need to show you the booking analysis. We had no penalties or warnings. Everything has gone to plan. I will just say though that when booking the show, I realised with about 25-30 minutes to go, I still had 2 matches and a few angles that I wanted to book. So there's a few last minute changes and I'm not 100% sure on the flow of this episode, so forgive me if certain things feel sort of mashed in there and rushed. But I'll let you be the judge of that as we get a rematch from the Big Bang pay-per-view, albeit taking place on the pre-show. And I don't actually have a cruiserweight match on the card tonight, which was one of the oversights. But to me, the least interesting part of my roster at the minute, so something I need to work on essentially. Super crazy and Tajiri win again when Tajiri pins Kid Romeo with a brainbuster, 3 count. Young Dragons, Romeo Skipper, the other teams in that match, and we see expected levels of performance considering it wasn't a high spots match. Not even sure why I didn't set it as a high spots match, but we are teasing a potential face turn for Jimmy Yang and Kaz Hayashi here. I just feel we're a little bit heel heavy in the cruiserweight division, so those two guys strike me as ideal candidates to take a baby face role. We then get Big Vito and Stormjet defeating Chavo Guerrero, Jamie Noble and Kui Wee. 5 minutes and 18. Big Vito pinning Jamie Noble, and again it's just 6 guys who we didn't have anything significant for on tonight's show. Vito off his game and performs quite far behind the rest of the guys in there, and I do, of all these wrestlers, feel most sorry for Chavo Guerrero Jr. We had a bit of a storyline going for him, didn't quite work out, and now he's back to that sort of lost in the shuffle situation. If anybody has any particular suggestions for Chavo, I do have something in mind for his next rivalry, but I'd be interested to hear that. And then despite him offering to put over David Flair in the pre-show, Curt Hennig defeats David Flair in the final Dark Show match with a fisherman suplex. And we do have a little segment with Curt Hennig on tonight's show, but I just thought we'd keep him wrestling and keep him putting in them good performances, and hopefully that is actually a boost for David Flair being in the ring with somebody so great. We then open WCW Nitro with Shane McMahon coming down to the ring, and he talks about the last 2 weeks of Nitro since New Blood Rising having what he can only describe as disappointing endings to the main event matches. There was that double count out between the Natural Born Thrillers, Mike Awesome and Lance Storm, and then last week the DQ when Buff Bagwell decided to get involved. Now he's going to deal with that man later on tonight, but he's got 2 announcements he wants to make right now, one regarding tonight and one about a future date. Tonight, given the volatile nature of this rivalry that goes back all the way to the reboot of WCW, there will be no countouts or no DQs in Mike Awesome's match with Rob Van Dam, as the only way to defeat your opponent will be to put them through a table. So just adding a stipulation to this match, given that it is a match we've already ran on the first episode of WCW Nitro, and if Rob Van Dam wins tonight, he will earn a shot at the United States Championship, as Shane told us in a previous episode. But what he didn't say was that that match would take place at WCW's next special show, September 19th, as Fall Brawl returns. Coming out from the back as part of what I've just noticed is actually a really solid way to open the show, and it says the crowd got hotter because of it, and it started us off with a strong start. So very pleased with this, as Lance Storm and Mike Awesome confront Shane McMahon. Lance says that RVD doesn't deserve another title shot. Lance has already beaten him twice. Shane says that both of those wins were controversial, but agrees that this will be his final shot if he can get past Mike Awesome tonight. Shane says that if Lance is so confident in Mike, he won't have to worry about any of this. Shane doesn't show, though, that if there is a third match in the trilogy between Lance Storm and Rob Van Dam, it will have a conclusive finish. But since Lance Storm is out here, Shane thinks that he should stay in the ring because Shane has just the man for him, an angry man at that, as the opening match is seamlessly transitioned into maybe suggest that Shane doesn't quite have too much of a structured plan for his show, which could be a criticism levelled against me, considering, again, I've not made notes on this show, I've just booked it forward, but it is what it is. Shane McMahon's booking by the seat of his pants, if that's the phrase. That doesn't make any sense, I don't think. But Lance Storm defeats Hugh Morrus 5 minutes and 42 by submission with a single leg Boston Crab. Now Mike Awesome does try to get involved during the match, but is sent to the back by the referee. Lash LaRue, who is at ringside, however, cannot help as Hugh Morrus is forced to tap out in the middle of the ring to a single leg Boston Crab. It told the story essentially that Hugh Morrus is angry and he took a lot of the fight to Lance Storm in the match, but ultimately the turning point was Mike Awesome getting involved, and while he did eventually get sent to the back, Hugh still couldn't recover from that. A 72 from Lance Storm is just what we want to see, and I do think that if Rob Van Dam wins tonight, not saying he definitely will, but if he and Lance Storm face off in a third match, which I am thinking I'm going to put a stipulation on, I'm sort of stuck in two minds at the minute. Not that I'm saying that Rob Van Dam's won tonight. But yeah, I think it's going to be our best match yet, considering it's also going to have a clean finish. I feel like I'm just giving away spoilers here, but we also foreshadow a heel turn for Hugh Morrus in this segment. Probably not, because him showing aggression towards Lance Storm is fair, but in the post-match we definitely turn the notch on that tease, as once he's on the outside, having been helped to his feet by Lash LaRue, Hugh Morrus continues to show his frustration and doesn't take the supportive words of Lash LaRue well. Lash is trying to be positive, and that's the last thing that the laughing man feels right now, when Lash kind of says, "Don't take it out on me, I had nothing to do with you losing." Hugh doesn't take it well and pushes his friend before storming up the ramp on his own. Lash follows after him, trying to reason with him, but we're just continuing Hugh Morrus being in a bit of a unstable state at the minute. Lance Storm stands tall alone, raising the United States Championship, when Booker T runs down and takes the United States Champion off his feet. Lance does eventually manage to scramble away and get out of the ring, but Booker T warns him that it is not over between the two top champions in WCW. He was seconds away from defeating Lance Storm cleanly last week when Buff Bagwell got involved. He still wants a clean one-on-one match between the two men. Diamond Dallas Page is then interviewed about his match with Mike Sanders and Reno up next. The two men set him up last week with Matt Jindrak and Shawn Stasiak joining their little catering crew, but tonight DDP has backup as he invites Johnny the Bull, a former member of the Natural Born Thrillers, with these guys into the shop with him. DDP tells us that he's been training hard with Johnny for some time now. This is a guy who is serious about getting to the top and not doing it by taking shortcuts like the rest of these guys. With that said, if those two jokers from the Peaks of Perfection want to get involved tonight, maybe they fancy their chances 4-on-2. Well, DDP says that an old friend has stopped by to visit him tonight, and to speak to Shane McMahon, to be fair, and it might be that that man is able to shatter the dreams of Mike and his buddies of ever getting the better of DDP. Bang. That is the match that's going to take place next. It's an okay segment with DDP improvising well as we go into Shane McMahon's office, the man in charge speaking with Pete Cass and Rodney about their match. Tonight they have officially signed a one-night contract with the company to face Chuck Palumbo and Sean O'Haire, and they feel it's just a matter of time before they are full-time members of the roster. But storming into the office, as we say, the Extreme Outsiders have a simple question for Shane. Where are they? Shane says he doesn't know. Jerry Lawler and Sir Nelson Knight haven't turned up for work tonight, but he's sure they'll be the first to know if and when they do arrive. Hack and Dream are of course annoyed by this, but Pete Gas chimes in that the Extreme Outsiders did kind of start it. He doesn't know what they're complaining about. This obviously doesn't go down well. The two cocky rich kids not quite realising who they are messing with here. The violent threats made towards them perhaps make things a little bit clearer. Rodney asks Shane if he's going to let these two bums speak to them like that, and Shane does actually kind of admit his old friends have a point, but Dreamer points out that the moment they took Francine was the moment that this stepped beyond a difference of opinion. If they're not here tonight, then Shane better find somebody who either he or Hack can beat the crap out of tonight, or better yet, that both of them can, or it might just be these two stooges who aren't going to make it to their match later tonight. Shane tells Tommy that he'll find them an opponent for tonight, but if Jerry arrives at any point, again, they'll be the first to know, and he'll be sending Jerry out to the ring, that face-to-face that Jerry suggested last week and then didn't show up for. So yeah, just a bit of a convoluted way of explaining a fairly simple segment. We do lose heat to one storyline, but I thought that the Shane's Friends storyline didn't have much heat anyway, so yeah, I'm still quite pleased with that. Another poor match, albeit with a strong performance from Diamond Dallas Page and middling from the rest, well, disappointing from the rest of them, we have to say. It is only 4 minutes though, when Shawn Stasiak and Matt Jindrak run in, and it is actually Johnny the Bull who looks to have the match won, hitting the forget about it to his former partner Reno, but Jindrak and Stasiak in, attacking the two men. Of course, DDP carried this match as we have a post-match attack, the Peaks of Perfection, joined by Reno and Mike Sanders, who take the attack up a level once it becomes a 4-on-1. They throw DDP to the outside, and they want to make an example of Johnny the Bull. He's been the guy who stepped shoulder to shoulder with DDP, and it seems like Mike directing traffic, explaining the plan to the other three as to what they need to do to Johnny to send the message to the rest of the roster to not help DDP. And of course, Mike wants this big scalp to put their names on the map, essentially. Sanders takes a little bit too long in this planning though. His confidence is turning into arrogance when Dustin Rhodes makes his return to WCW. Now, somebody who we did see throughout the first 3 months of 2001, so it's not like he's not been here for years, and it was only the contractual issue why I didn't have him from the start. I would have happily had him from the very beginning of the company coming back. We're still putting it over as a pretty major return. He helps DDP to his feet on the outside, and there is a nod between the two men that indicates they are ready to fight. Dustin Rhodes grabs 2 chairs from ringside, one of which he hands to DDP, and the two men are able to send the 4 power plant graduates packing. 2 of the more experienced heads on this roster check on Johnny the Bull, who is able to get back to his feet, and while it is a 3-on-4 outnumbering situation, it is the faces who once again stand tall, losing heat with a pretty poor segment based on the fact that there's 5 out of 7 people in the segment who aren't very over. The most important thing is Dustin Rhodes, the natural gimmick, got a great rating, so to me that's more important than anything else. And in a time where I don't really want to hurt too many heels that we're trying to establish, I think these 4 are guys who have a look and a numbers advantage that makes them a threat, but it's going to give us a chance for Dustin Rhodes and DDP in particular to get some convincing victories and continue building them back up towards the top of the card. We then see Steve Corino arriving at the building earlier today, with Bob Sapp opening the door as he and Dawn Marie step out of their vehicle. Corino has a message to deliver to the WCW audience and the WCW roster tonight, saying that tonight he is finally going to let the cat out of the bag and nobody is going to want to miss it. Of course, him referring to the belt bag that he has been carrying with him since coming to WCW. And fun fact, I almost forgot to book this segment. Yeah, it's in there between the last 2 matches, but I really had an issue with basically pre-set up too many things to happen on tonight's show. There's a match, in fact the next match, that probably could have been cut to just work things a little bit more smoothly, but it's a good match that I wanted to book on tonight's show. So yeah, that's the unfortunate side effect of it. A video package looks back at the return of the man they call Vader, losing heat to his storyline, but just showing how he has been dominant since returning to WCW. The package also features Vader's work in Pro Wrestling Noah, only showing the moments where he is in charge, of course. He has his sights set on global domination, a trans-Pacific superstar. Vader is currently splitting his time between Japan and the United States. He's a man with a chip on his shoulder and a lot to prove. We will hear from Jimmy Hart later tonight, but again, this is where I don't need to use Big Van Vader on every single show because he's got 2 jobs. We can happily have him miss a few weeks and just use Jimmy Hart or the commentators or these video packages to keep up on what he's up to, basically. Kanyon then defeats Billy Kidman in 7 minutes and 39, a match that I had to take time off of because we were over the 55% upper limit on match angle ratio, but this is still a good match nonetheless. Could have, of course, been better, but finally gaining some heat to that generation of innovation storyline. Now Kanyon gets annoyed at Crowbar and Jet at ringside because they're unwilling to help him cheat to beat Billy Kidman. Eventually he does manage to hit a low blow, a poke to the eye before hitting the flatliner. Maybe he uses the ropes when he pins him, some kind of tainted finish that Kanyon himself has to use underhanded tactics. Kanyon has his arm raised after the match, but he's clearly annoyed about something and calls Jet and Crowbar into the ring. He berates them for refusing to help him after everything that he has done for them. They need to prove their loyalty. He demands that they destroy Billy Kidman. Now this is a really bad segment, understandably I'd say, based on the people's overness, but Crowbar looks to Jet and he's sort of like, well, should we do it? He has done a lot for us. Do we need to repay that? But Jet says, no way. The 2 men leave Kanyon in the ring with the innovator of offense pointing and yelling at them. He's sort of leaning over the ropes as he's really making sure that they hear what he has to say, but what he doesn't see is that Billy Kidman has now returned to his feet and hits him with a Kid Crusher. Kidman then tells Kanyon, screw you, getting the last word despite his defeat. And the idea here is that Kanyon needed a significant victory. I felt he beat Johnny the Bull last week, but I think he needed another decent victory over somebody with a little bit of overness if we are to continue trying to build him as a serious threat, considering he has already lost a few matches. But because I think this is going to be where Billy Kidman and Kanyon sort of depart in their path, I just wanted to give Billy Kidman that last moment in an angle so that it's basically, as we have the storylines in game, I see this as a mid-card equal level rivalry kind of thing. So if both of them leave in pretty much the same position that they started the storyline in, I'll be happy. They can move on to other things with what I think was just a decent mid-card storyline between them, despite some of the really bad angle ratings we've had. Diamond Dallas Page and Johnny the Bull stand with the returning Dustin Rhodes as DDP puts over the Natural on his return to WCW. DDP puts over how great it is to see one of his old friends back in the company and then gives the floor to the returning competitor. Now, the first part of the promo was just Diamond Dallas Page here, and that gets a 56, so interesting there that actually Dustin Rhodes was better than him on the night. Asked about his return, Dustin Rhodes says that it's simple. He's been sat at home watching on the sidelines every single week, and to be honest, his hands have been tied. He'd have been here a hell of a lot sooner if he had the chance to be, but sitting back and watching has given him a greater perspective. He's been doing this for so long without any breaks that it was a good time to take stock of what he loves about Shane McMahon's vision of WCW, but admits there's a lot that he doesn't like in this company, namely those punks who took out DDP and Johnny earlier tonight. Dustin says he was here tonight to talk business with Shane, and truth be told, he hadn't even signed for WCW when he went out there and did what he did. However, as soon as he got back to the office, when Shane saw the reaction that the people gave Dustin Rhodes, he had a deal on the table, and Dustin Rhodes has happily signed it. What Dustin's ultimate goal is in WCW remains the same as every man who steps in this business, but tonight at least, he's just happy to have his friends back, and if any of those guys fancy a match with him next week, one-on-one, Dustin Rhodes is your newest member of the WCW roster and isn't interested in wasting any more time before he returns to the squared circle. In Shane's office, Arn Anderson is speaking to the boss, putting over his feeling that Dustin Rhodes is a damn good addition to this roster. Storming into the office, Buff Bagwell asks Shane what is going on. He heard him earlier in the night saying that he's going to deal with Buff Bagwell. He just doesn't understand it. Buff says that he has been waiting by his phone all week for a call from Shane apologising for what he's done to him, and yet Shane talks out there like he's going to be punishing Buff Bagwell. Buff says that what Shane did last week was BS and he knows it. Rob Van Dam wouldn't have had a chance against Buff if it hadn't have been for the impromptu nature of the match. Now, I'm not sure that's how he'd have worded it, but that's the point that we want him to get across. Shane asks if Buff is complaining about him putting him, a wrestler, into a wrestling match, but Buff says that Shane knows that isn't the point. He's happy to fight anyone, anytime, under any circumstances. The point is, but Shane doesn't give him the chance to finish that point. That is exactly the point. Anyone, anytime, any circumstances. That's just given Shane a fantastic idea. He then sends Buff Bagwell to the ring, with the man apoplectic to find himself yet again in this situation. Turning to Arn Anderson, Shane says, "Go tell Tommy that something has come up." So a good segment here with Buff Bagwell and Shane McMahon. I'm really enjoying the dynamic between them, and I've had a few comments saying that basically my distaste for Buff Bagwell is shining through, but actually making him one of the more enjoyable characters in the save, and personally he's probably my favourite person to book, and he's going to continue being throughout the run of this save. We then come back from the break to an Extreme Rules match. Buff Bagwell in the ring waiting. What's coming for him when Hack and Tommy Dreamer come out? This gives Hack the chance to get some of his frustrations out, but because there's no DQ, Tommy Dreamer also gets involved and hits him with a chair. So for almost 3 minutes here, we see Buff Bagwell just getting the absolute snot beaten out of him by these two guys, but I wasn't quite willing to have him pinned, and to be fair, Buff wasn't willing to do the honours for these guys, and genuinely I don't blame him. If he was going to lose a 3-minute match to Hack, then I would never beat the burial allegations. The way this match ends is that Buff rolls out the ring, he gets hit by Dreamer again, but eventually he's managing to get away. He sort of crawls away and gets himself out of there, essentially scurries to safety. Buff Bagwell, of course, he's going to be even more annoyed by that. We're going to follow that up in a big way pretty soon, so don't go anywhere, as we do get a post-match segment with Hack and Dreamer. Buff is long gone. He had no interest in taking any more of that beating from the Extreme Outsiders, and those two guys do turn their attention to Jerry Lawler and Nelson Knight. They call the two men cowards for backing down from this fight. They made the challenge last week, and yet they're nowhere to be seen. So Dreamer and Hack have something else in mind. They are going to go through Shane McMahon, go through the proper courses to make a challenge to those two men. However, they are interrupted by the music of Jerry Lawler, who comes out with Nelson Knight and their captive Francine. They're warned against taking another step towards the king, with, of course, the threat of violence towards Francine at the hands of Sir Nelson Knight, because, of course, Dreamer and Hack aren't just going to wait in the ring and let Jerry Lawler say his thing unless there is a reason. And of course, what could happen to Francine in just a few seconds at the hands of Nelson Knight is something that they are willing to hang back on. Jerry says that they're not going to have to wait long to get this skank back, but it's not going to be tonight. Dreamer tells Jerry that he's going to kick his old ass when he gets his hands on him. However, Jerry says that he's not going to get his hands on Jerry Lawler, don't be silly. But next week, Sir Nelson Knight versus Tommy Dreamer. Lawler reckons by then they'll have had all the fun they need to have with Francine. If Hack agrees to not enter the building during Tommy Dreamer and Nelson Knight's match next week, then he will happily hand the girl back over. But he'll be speaking with the arena security, and if he hears any rumour of Hack being anywhere near this building, then it's not going to be a pretty reunion for Francine and Dreamer. Lawler is reminding them that he is in control of this situation, and once Dreamer is laid flat on the ground, the King will tell him exactly what comes next and when it comes. So we are going to have Dreamer and Nelson Knight next week, but that is then building to the next big moment in this storyline that I am very much looking forward to. We do lose heat. It's a poor segment. Lawler is really good, so it is just Dreamer very much struggling. But again, the purpose of this storyline, I hope, is to elevate Hack and Dreamer by putting them in a storyline with somebody who, as we've seen earlier, is now classed as a star. We do get that follow-up, and I used an angle idea here that has helped it, so it's a 70 that might not have been, but a fantastic segment as we see a furious Buff Bagwell through the back. He is staggering, he is coughing and spluttering because his body is bruised and he has been battered by the steel chair and Singapore cane shots of the Extreme Outsiders. Buff simply has reached a breaking point, tossing over equipment, pushing officials who try and stop him from his path of destruction, barging into the office of Shane McMahon. Buff is so furious that he can't bring himself to speak, and the sort of half smirk on the face of Shane McMahon, it just pushes him over the edge. Buff's just sort of speaking incoherently. He asks if he can help Buff in any way, and yes, no, you. After a pause, Buff has two words for Shane McMahon: I quit. He then storms back out of the office, slamming the door as he leaves, and Shane is pretty surprised by Buff's decision, but there it is, the build-up that we've all been leading to. Buff Bagwell has quit WCW. I'm sure that's what everybody expected to be the follow-up to this storyline. And actually, I'm half expecting that he might shoot quit because of the way he's been booked. He is currently angry. That's why I didn't risk him being pinned by Hack on tonight's show. And actually, I did originally have it as Tommy Dreamer v Buff Bagwell. And setting that as a draw, even with Buff kept strong, did mean that he was extremely unhappy. So he probably would have legit quit. I managed to put Hack in there, and I've put Buff Bagwell keep strong in the note, and that meant that he wasn't too upset. So I'm hoping that we can keep him around, despite the fact that on screen he's just quit. And this marks the official bottoming out of Buff Bagwell's character, and means that, and I'm going to let you hold me accountable to this, I can't again say, trust me on this, I've got a long-term plan for Buff Bagwell. If I use that phrase again, I'm absolutely lying to you, because the beginning of the long-term direction for Buff Bagwell begins next week. Hopefully you'll trust the process as you see where we're going with the Buff Bagwell quitting WCW storyline. I think it's going to be an entertaining journey, and it does end of what I've currently got planned with him winning championship gold, albeit that is well into the year 2002, so plenty more fun to be had before then. We then get a promo from Sugar Shane. It's an okay segment, very, very middling to be fair. He makes his way down to the ring, cutting a promo about his run as the WCW World Cruiserweight Champion. Shane says that someone told him this week that he has now held the title for 167 days, and that makes him by far the longest reigning Cruiserweight Champion in history. Now that's something only I noticed this week, but we're also going to have Shane say that he's not interested in that kind of thing because he's not looking at records and history. He is looking to the future of this division that he wants to carry and his future as Cruiserweight Champion. He wants to know why Juventud Guerrera and Psicosis are here and what their specific interest in him was last week. Of course, he has a pretty good idea of what it was. Coming out from the back, the self-proclaimed Lucha Royalty repeat their actions of circling around the champion in the ring, and he obviously feels understandably threatened. Juvi takes the microphone from Helms and says, "We're here for that," pointing at the title. Helms is of course protective of his title and of the Cruiserweight division as a whole, saying that in that case there's two things they can do. They can put their work in and work their way up the division, or they can try and beat him and earn a shot at the Cruiserweight Championship. That way, nothing is handed out even to royalty in WCW. Psicosis looks like he's going to go for Helms after this comment of firing back at them, but Hoovy puts a hand on his chest and stops him. Guerrera laughs and looks to be pretty cool about the situation. He tells Shane that he has a third idea. They're going to go talk to Sugar Shane's boss and see if they can't sort things out man to man. So he's kind of trying to big league the champion here, trying to suggest that he can go over Sugar Shane's head in this matter, and we will actually have the debut of Juventud and Psicosis in ring next week. So unfortunately tonight there is no cruiserweight match, and like I said at the very start of the save, I spoke about wanting to rebuild the division, and it's not gone well so far. The issue for me is we've just not got enough TV time. 90 minutes, I've got a lot of people I want to use. Unfortunately, sometimes it's the tag team division that kind of only gets a couple of minute segment. There's been times when Booker T isn't being used very much, whereas on this show, it's the Cruiserweight division. When we have a B show, and I'm even thinking if it's a possibility, if we get another A show, I mean, I feel like bringing back Thunder wouldn't be the smartest idea, but I do feel like having 2.5 hours rather than 1.5 hour of TV to work with is better now that we've got like a 50 strong roster rather than when we started with about 35. So that's something to consider in the future, of course. I do wonder if I can actually change the show length just to 2 hours in the game. I'll look into it because I probably would prefer 2 hours than 1.5 hours, despite the fact that back at the start of the save, I would have hated to have had to book 2 hours. So that's a sign of progress somewhat, I guess. We then get an interview with Jimmy Hart in the back, and it's kind of another sign here. We've got Curt Hennig stood beside him. We've brought him back 2 weeks ago, and now there's not really space for him to do anything that significant on the show. So it's hard, but it is, like I said, we're trying to establish a lot of people, so you're going to take a back seat sometimes. Jimmy says that, as you can see, he is pleased to report positive talks between the two parties after he spoke to him last week, and while he is delighted to represent Big Van Vader, Jimmy says that Curt represents another all-time great in this business who he is proud to work with, and he agrees that it's a travesty that a man like Curt Hennig has never held the World Heavyweight Championship. He'd argue he might be the greatest to ever do it who hasn't been the World Heavyweight Champion. That's where Jimmy comes in, but next week, to signify the enrollment of his newest client, Curt Hennig and Vader will make a one-time appearance as a tag team. Thankfully, a certain Mr. Kanyon has volunteered a couple of willing names to learn a lesson from two of the greats of this business. Curt then says that he isn't here to be a tag team wrestler, but he is going to do a favour for Jimmy Hart, because Hart is going to handle everything outside of the ring for Curt Hennig going forward, while he concentrates on his path to the World Heavyweight Championship. So keeping things very simple for Curt Hennig. And I've got the issue here now that I've promised Psicosis and Hoovy in action next week. I've promised this tag team match, and there's a couple of other matches that I'm pretty sure I've said are going to happen next week. Yeah, we've got Dustin Rhodes' debut. So we see how we pretty quickly fill up the card, and then yeah, there's not much room if there's anybody else. Like, I want to follow up the Steve Corino thing that's coming later. Where's that going to fit in? So again, it's really hard to put all these moving pieces together. So that's why we just get a short segment, but it gains heat to storylines and advances another one. So no complaints really. He's been brought in to strengthen our in-ring roster, but when we've got Mike Awesome and Rob Van Dam, and we've got Billy Kidman and Kanyon, and then a few other squash matches in there, we're okay, I think, to not use him in the ring for a week anyway. A really poor match. I'm talking about how we don't necessarily need Curt Hennig. Maybe it'd have been an idea to give him a match rather than Rodney and Pete Gas, but it's always just going to be a short-ish match, and Pete Gas and Rodney do take the fight to the Natural Born Thrillers early on, but they're just not on the level. We did this as a chaotic match because we can see there Pete Gas and Rodney are really, really bad wrestlers. And when I started the save, I didn't even have them in mind, but I thought it just adds a little bit to the challenge, doesn't it? Bringing into a Shane's best friends and having to try and work them into storylines and stuff. So they lose in a mayhem match. We do give Chuck Palumbo the rare pinfall victory here. It's normally Shawn with the Shawn Torn Bomb. But yeah, they're just really bad, Pete Gas and Rodney. And it's fair. It's an accurate representation of them in the game, I think. But again, it's an introduction of new characters as losers. But then I do have something planned for them, and to be honest, you do need these kinds of characters on the roster who presumably can get a lot of heat by just being really annoying guys, but ultimately they're not going to be winning too many matches, unfortunately. If you're a fan of the Mean Street Posse, the Natural Born Thrillers stand tall. There's not much more to be said about that. They are the single most dominant tag team in the company today. Rob Van Dam is then shown in the back doing his stretches ahead of the main event. When Booker T enters the room, while we don't hear what we're saying, the two men are in some kind of discussion, and with the spectre of Lance Storm over the main event, he could potentially get involved. Booker T, we see, is basically the assumption is that he's going to have Rob's back tonight, and just having them two on screen gives us a 75 rating, which I really like because, I mean, they're just the top two faces in the company. Sorry, Diamond Dallas Page. We then go into the aforementioned Steve Corino segment, and it's not good at all, is it? I suppose we're bringing the crowd down before the main event. So if we look at it in perfect show theory terms, then maybe it's a good thing, but this is B-show fodder, isn't it? Steve Corino sets up on the stage. There's a podium in place as the belt bag that he's been carrying for weeks is rested upon it, joined by Dawn Marie. There's no Bob Sapp, so I think I must have put him off screen. Steve Corino says that he is here to give a history lesson to these shallow fans of WCW, but first he needs to show them why this means so much, why he's here, and he unzips his belt bag, revealing the NWA World Heavyweight Champion. The King of Old School tells us this is the real World Championship. Corino says that Shane McMahon might be keen to rewrite the recent history of WCW, and who can blame him? But Steve Corino isn't going to let that happen, because while WCW lay dormant, in no small part due to what had happened to the prestige of their World Heavyweight Championship over the last 18 months, Steve Corino dragged a sleeping giant back to relevance, the title held by Lou Thesz, Dory Funk Jr. and Harley Race, the 10 pounds of gold, the true World Heavyweight Championship in this business, and that title is held by him. These people may have short memories, but Steve Corino does not. He remembers the ancient history of the National Wrestling Alliance and its World Heavyweight Championship, just like he remembers the recent history of the WCW World Heavyweight Championship. He isn't going to let anybody forget what happened, but he does stop short of mentioning any of those names who basically dragged the WCW World Championship through the mud. I might be hinting at something here, but I am not going to openly mention that Vince Russo and David Arquette have held the title, because that would completely bury Booker T and his reign as WCW champion. But he says that there's a lot of men in this company carrying the legacy of names that they didn't earn. They crumble under the weight of that one bloodline, but Steve Corino carries something with him that is much, much heavier than any one name. The weight of history, of tradition, and of a name that he did earn, the NWA World Heavyweight Champion. So hopefully an introduction to where we go in here, and the fact that gains heat to the storyline absolutely says it all. But of course, shots fired at David Flair. You could argue also shots fired at Chavo Guerrero, and maybe even the recently arrived Dustin Rhodes, given that we know this guy does have history with the Rhodes family. So I think a pretty good segment all in all, where Corino basically says some people are only here because of who their parents and who their family are, whereas Steve Corino is here because he is a World Heavyweight Champion. And of course, this begins a potential build to a champion v champion match, albeit with a diversion to somebody who isn't quite on that level. As we follow up in the back, we see that David Flair was trying to get out to confront Steve Corino during that whole segment. Again, why would David Flair not have come out during that? The reason for that is that he was being stopped in his tracks by Bob Sapp. Now, it's another terrible segment, but squares in my head the logic of the previous segment, so unfortunately, it's something that we're going to have to deal with. Coming back through the curtain, Steve Corino walks by David Flair with the NWA World Heavyweight Championship over his shoulder, the smug character that we're building for Steve Corino here. Walking away with Sapp and Dawn Marie, Corino is challenged by David Flair, who says that once you're done hiding behind that big, dumb bodyguard of yours, we'll see how tough you are. Sapp stops. He's not going to take that from David Flair, obviously. Corino saves him from a maul-in. He tells Sapp, you'll get your chance to get your hands on David. Don't worry about that. And they leave the building happy with a job well done. And I didn't really put over, but I do think it's quite significant showing the NWA World Heavyweight Championship on screen in WCW. Like I said, I didn't want to dilute the company with too many titles to begin with. I didn't want to bring in another mid-card title with us already having the United States Championship, but I do think that this is more a storyline device and is an interesting way to use the fact that we've brought Steve Corino in, somebody who WCW had actually signed to a contract in real life, but not ignoring the fact that he does have commitments outside of the company. But yeah, I'm really happy with that as we come back to the tables match main event, an 81, matching our best match so far. I think it was Kanyon and Rob Van Dam, wasn't it, previously? Well, this one, a tables match. The reason I made it a tables match is because Mike Awesome was losing again, and I didn't want him taking another pinfall. It says pinfall. I set this as a tables match. I'm almost certain of it. Oh, I didn't set this as a tables match. Oh, that's really frustrating. We're just going to have to ignore that. I'm really sorry. If you can all pretend that it was a tables match, I'll pretend that it's a tables match. And when I look back on the matches and it doesn't say tables match in that little description box, that's really going to bug me more than you would ever understand. But yeah, Lance Storm comes out, tries to get involved to stop Rob Van Dam. We want a situation where Mike Awesome's setting up to powerbomb RVD through a table, and Lance Storm is holding the table in position because he's helped Mike to get into that position. I'm doing all this table spots, and it's a bloody singles match. But then Booker T comes out and bookends Lance Storm through the table, so that when Mike Awesome is actually going for that powerbomb, he looks and sees there isn't actually a table anymore. RVD slips out the back. Maybe even Mike Awesome is hit with another bookend from Booker T, so Booker does actually, again, it's a way of keeping Mike strong in defeat, and eventually a 5-star frog splash and a table break in 11 minutes and 26. I really shouldn't let that bother me as much as I do. I'm actually literally tempted to close out this game, lose all this recording, and go back, but I'm not going to do that because my mistakes just have to be part of it, and RVD celebrates a victory. Thankfully, there's not much left because I've kind of lost a lot of momentum to this, haven't I? Lance Storm and Booker T got involved in the closing stage of the main event, but we sign off. We have a new number one contender to the United States Championship. The commentators remind us that in 3 weeks' time, Bob Van Dam will face Lance Storm once again at WCW Nitro Fall Brawl. So what I'm going to say is we either made it just a no DQ match in the opening segment, and then that bit is inaccurate, so it's up to you. That's actually our best episode yet, I think. Making money, gaining popularity, so I should be really, really happy. I'm going to try and get that out of my head now. But yeah, that is WCW Nitro for this week. We're going to actually advance through, I think, to the 1st of September, because I've got something in mind for the next month's shows. It's also, I think, our best rated episode by some distance, so all the positives coming out of this show, and I can only focus on one negative. Johnny the Bull getting buried by Johnny the Ace. But yeah, that might be a fair cop, to be fair. I've not really looked at how good Johnny the Bull is in game. I do know that I am going to look as well at how bad Pete Gas and Rodney are, because I knew they were bad, but I didn't realise they were that bad. So the selling of him, so he's not a great seller, but he's not the worst we've ever seen. Yeah, they're really bad. They've got okay performance skills. I think that is what saves them from being absolutely like 10 rated in-ring performances. And they're okay apart from their wrestling, which in a wrestling company might be a little bit of an issue. But I will just go through now to the 1st of September 2001. 30 days of September, April, June. Yep, so that's tomorrow. 1st of... What? Oh, we're in August. Yeah, 30 days. Yeah. August, that's 31 days. Konnan's been offered a touring contract. I'm going to delete that one as well. And we will just quickly look at the top 100s just to see some good news. That Nitro that we did there, the top one so far, the match is second to Kanyon. If it had been a tables match, it might have got an 82. And yeah, the TV rating considerably better than anything we've had before. So yeah, good news overall. A good show. Happy with everything that's gone down. And yeah, I've not quite decided what I'm going to do with the month of September yet. I did have something in mind, but it just completely depends. The return of Brian Clark and Brian Adams is an interesting one, as is the formation of a new promotion. I think that might be something worth looking at, because in the next few months there's a good chance that some of the people that we're keeping an eye on might end up in contracts with the WWA. They are a small rated company with apparently no money. That doesn't seem unlikely, but Andrew McManus has founded them. I'm wondering if Jeremy Borash and Jeff Jarrett will be on board with them. We'll follow that up, of course, in the future, and I'll show you how WWA build their roster. But it is September the 1st, 2001, a big month coming up with Fall Brawl announced for a few weeks' time. Thank you for watching this episode, and hopefully you will join me next time for more great follow-up. The NWA World Heavyweight Championship has appeared on Nitro. Dustin Rhodes set to make his debut, so plenty to look forward to from my point of view, and hopefully you'll feel the same way ahead of the next episode of this series. Cheers.